There is a line in the Hagakure, the famous text on samurai philosophy, that gets quoted constantly. The way of the samurai is found in death. People read that and they imagine a warrior who has transcended fear entirely. Someone so committed to dying that fear simply stopped applying to him. That is a very romantic idea. It is also almost completely wrong. The samurai were human beings. Their bodies produced adrenaline before battle the same way yours does before a difficult conversation, a job interview, or a near miss on the highway. Their hearts raced, their hands shook. Some of them vomited, some of them froze. And the culture that surrounded them, for all its philosophy and discipline, knew this perfectly well. In fact, the entire framework of Bushido, the code that governed samurai life, was not built for people who felt no fear. It was built precisely because they did, which, when you think about it, makes the whole thing considerably more impressive. Let's start with what fear actually meant in samurai culture, because it was understood very differently than we understand it today. In the modern world, fear is often treated as a problem to be solved. You feel afraid, you identify the cause, you address it, the fear goes away, you maybe download an app about it. The samurai tradition had a fundamentally different relationship with the emotion. Fear was not a problem. Fear was a signal. It meant something real was happening, something worth your full attention. The question was never how to eliminate fear. The question was what to do while you were feeling it. This distinction matters enormously. Samurai were not trained to stop being afraid. They were trained to act correctly in spite of being afraid. And those are completely different skills requiring completely different kinds of preparation. The training itself was designed with this in mind. Young samurai in their formative years were deliberately exposed to things that frightened them. They were sent to execute condemned prisoners. They were required to visit execution grounds alone at night to touch the heads of the dead. They were made to walk through the most dangerous parts of a city unarmed and alone. None of this was cruelty for its own sake. It was systematic desensitization. The idea was to make the nervous system familiar with extreme situations so that when real danger arrived, the body had already been there before. Modern exposure therapy works on exactly the same principle. The samurai got there about 800 years earlier without a waiting list or a copay. One practice that appears repeatedly in historical accounts is what might be called fear journaling, though the samurai would not have used that term. Warriors were encouraged to meditate daily on their own death. Not in a morbid or dramatic way, but as a practical exercise. Imagine every possible way you could die. Imagine it in detail. Sit with the image until the panic it produces fades into something quieter. Do this every morning. The goal was not to enjoy thinking about death. The goal was to make the idea of death so familiar that it lost its power to hijack your mind at the critical moment. Your morning routine probably involves coffee and a phone. Theirs involved contemplating every possible way the day could end badly. Different approaches. This practice is described in detail in the Hagakure. The author Yamamoto Tsunetomo writes that a samurai should have his death resolved in advance, so that when it comes, in whatever form, the response is not shock but recognition. You have already been there 1,000 times in your mind. The real event, when it arrives, is simply the last rehearsal. But what happened when the fear arrived anyway? Because it did. The historical record makes this clear in ways that the mythology tends to omit. Accounts from actual battles describe samurai shaking visibly before combat. There are records of experienced warriors admitting to subordinates that they felt something close to panic during certain engagements. One general, in a letter written the night before a major battle that he expected to lose, described lying awake, unable to still his mind, his body refusing to cooperate with the composure he wanted to project. He wrote about it not with shame, but with a kind of matter-of-fact honesty, as if acknowledging the weather, which is genuinely refreshing. A hardened samurai general, veteran of multiple campaigns, essentially writing, "Not going to lie, tonight is rough," 800 years before anyone invented the group chat. This is important. The samurai tradition did not demand that fear be invisible. It demanded that it be managed. A warrior who admitted fear privately, to himself or to a trusted companion, was not considered weak. A warrior who allowed fear to drive his decisions in the field, who retreated when he should have held, or froze when he should have acted, that was the failure the code was designed to prevent. The concept of dying before you die, resolving in advance that you are already dead, that this life has already been surrendered, was the central technology for managing fear in the moment of crisis. If you have already accepted that you are gone, then there is nothing left to protect. And if there is nothing left to protect, then fear loses most of its leverage over you. You can still feel it. It simply has no currency anymore. It sounds extreme. It also sounds, if you sit with it for a moment, surprisingly logical. Breathing was also taken seriously in ways that modern neuroscience has since confirmed are effective. Controlled breath before battle, slow, deliberate, through the nose, was a standard practice. Samurai were not doing this because it felt nice. They were doing it because it works. Slow breathing directly engages the parasympathetic nervous system and lowers the physiological intensity of the fear response. They didn't know why it worked. They knew that it did. Thousands of years of instinct occasionally beat a peer-reviewed study to the conclusion. There was also a social dimension that is easy to underestimate. Samurai did not typically fight alone. They fought in groups, in the presence of men they had trained with, lived with, and in many cases grown up with. The fear of being seen to fail, of being the one who broke, was in many accounts described as more powerful than the fear of death itself. This is not unique to samurai culture. Military historians have noted across virtually every era and culture that soldiers in combat are more afraid of letting their companions down than they are of dying. Apparently, the fear of embarrassment is genuinely one of the most durable forces in human history. Make of that what you will. The samurai system used this instinct deliberately, structuring loyalty and reputation in ways that made social courage, showing up, holding the line, not being the one who ran, the most reliable motivator available. What this all adds up to is something genuinely interesting. The samurai were not fearless. They were arguably more honest about fear than most cultures before or since. They built a philosophy not around eliminating it, but around making it irrelevant. Through preparation, through acceptance of death, through breath, through the weight of obligation to others. They looked at the most frightening thing a human being can face, and they built a systematic response to it, tested over generations, refined through actual use. The legend says they felt nothing. The reality is more impressive. They felt everything. They acted anyway. That gap between what you feel and what you do is what Bushido was actually about, not the absence of fear, the decision to move through it. If this is the kind of history you want to keep exploring, the real version, the human version, the one that doesn't get cleaned up for the movies, then subscribe to Samurai Decoded. There is a lot more coming. Every week we go deeper into what samurai life actually looked like, how they thought, what they struggled with, and what we can still learn from them. Subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.